person. People who think I'm like, dude, whatever. And I agree, we'll be there.
Almost all competitors in person. There's always been one judge online. This is our first.
This is enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't.
Okay.
I didn't last round except to believe the online judge who kept turning his camera off and not paying attention. This is mine.
Give me this one.
No, not this one. Sorry. Sorry. It had never been here, good.
Oh, yeah, how's it going?
Hey.
Thank you.
What do I?
Okay, we're reading the fracking action.
Check
yeah.
with her if you can use.
Oh, well, fracking's good, so. You got cards? Forgive me.
We don't.
I didn't think so.
I know high school guy.
Tested that.
Simple nasal swab.
So take one. I am a little concerned about where you thought it would go.
I just wasn't sure.
Really?
Okay, I'll let you know what this thing says.
Oh, wow, it's live stream.
Yeah.
Okay.
They need to retell this live stream.
Paper.
Julian.
Julian
Oh,
Bill Bottle.
My novice.
yeah, it's gonna take you a long time to do that.
Are you the, do you have a, is there a?
Oh, yeah.
Not, that's not fair.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah, we switched.
Is there an outlet anywhere? It's not like a Julian Kevin throw down. Only 8 is Julian throw down.
True. Yeah, true. True. It's okay.
And does someone have a pen I could also grab? Not that I'm
Pens.
totally
Well,
unprepared.
I got a bunch of pens.
Same.
So, I guess.
We have so much in common. You know,
Like what?
our names.
Thank you. Of course.
So look at this. That's already.
What do you mean?
That's already.
You do actually have a lot of fun.
Like, do you still play Smash?
Do I still play Smash? Dude, obviously.
Who would win right now?
Who?
Yeah, who would win?
Me versus you?
Yeah.
You. Probably you, honestly.
Yeah, okay, see. I like this to be known.
Who's the other person on this page?
Harkins, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm trying to get some lumbar support back here.
That's smart. I want to see what's that.
You don't have to play it.
I want to see what's that.
There you go.
Download it.
I'm gonna win it. Judges running. Great. First plan, the United States federal government to expand the scope of its core antitrust laws to account for total welfare, including determining that failure to pay an upstream of carbon fuel and greenhouse gas emissions is anti-competitive conduct. The consumer welfare standard relies on a market failure approach that's impossible to prove and fails to address systemic risks like climate change. Only expanding the scope of the CWS to account for total welfare can address systemic failure. And 21 courts are leads to non-economic justification. Market failure sets out also the reality of increasing universal ownership. Market failure relies on the increasing consumer preference for courts to be valid. The justice municipal market running from capturing systemic risks like climate change into treasury expands for review to encompass non-economic impacts to welfare. Aligned with the universal ownership is abandoned by the courts. The universal welfare, consumer welfare, and peace collaborative address to systemic economic risk. Climate change is a system disruptor and a risk amplifier. Only mitigation prevents biodiversity loss, marine ecosystem collapse, resource wars, global food scarcity, and extreme weather events. Uniquely as disparate impacts, IPCC in 22 reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius, the near-term cause unavoidable increase in multiple climate hazards, and risk to ecosystem, human level risk, would depend on coverage, trends, vulnerability, exposure, adaptation, near-term actions, reduce projected loss, increasing frequency and severity, duration of the extreme events, replace marine ecosystem, high risk of biodiversity loss, violent conflict, migration patterns will be driven by climate change, the natural system, differences in emission scenarios. Beyond 24, the magnitude of the rate of climate change and associated risk depends on near-term mitigation, biodiversity loss, and degradation associated with every increment of global warming, high extinction rates for endemic species, protected to at least several risks, individual water availability, hazards with continued groundwater availability. Yes, threat climate change will increase the pressure on food production, especially in vulnerable regions, undermining food security. Warming will progressively weaken soil health, reduce marine or animal biomass, increase the health of premature death, and foodborne, waterborne, vector-borne diseases projected to increase climate change risk. Clean infrastructure, global average economic demand increases. Climate change impact is also becoming more difficult to manage. Multiple climate change hazards will occur simultaneously, combining overall risk cascading as sectors region, generating new sources of vulnerability, sea level rise, cascading compounding impacts, resulting in loss of coastal ecosystem depending on the magnitude, duration, or impacts will cause release of additional greenhouse gas emissions, and some will be irreversible. Climate change is a regressive social inequity that's likely impacts 15. Climate change is profoundly affects low-income countries, profoundly affect human rights, social justice, droughts, extreme weather, forcing many countries to ban refugees, adverse health effects, related disorders, disease, consequence, threaten civil and political rights, access to safe food, shelter, culture. People who are most vulnerable include poor people, minorities, people with chronic disease, low-income countries, produce at least GHGs more adversely affected than high-income countries. Mitigation is the silver bullet. Increasing levels of climate change exponentially increases its negative consequences. That's Lester 19. A problem becomes less catastrophic, less warning. 2 degrees Celsius, less harmful than 3, which is more survivable than 4. Each increase automatically more dire for life than 1%. It's always worth it to prevent more warning. Mitigation is a silver bullet. We can solve at least a lot of the impact. Disease reduction will depend on mitigation moves. Mitigation makes adaptation much more effective, and short-term mitigation does matter. The impact is exponential and increasing. That's from Desjardins and 13. Emission cuts will immediately affect warming. There's a misconception that there's a delay between initial climate response and immediate decrease in emission result immediate decrease in the rate of warming. That only false rather than reducing CO2 emissions. Antitrust is historically a weapon of the elite, but it can be revitalized for public goods like climate change. That's Sedano and 2010. Reducing emissions in public good only state intervention might be expected to be effective. Combination policy can provide that covers the Chicago paradigm. The reflection of a stable economy can be considered to be a human right governance, not affirming obligation to protect individuals. The market fails to supply them. Therefore, the only effective providers of state to make combination useful insurance necessary to reject Chicago antitrust rules. Chicago school states antitrust policy all to do with consumer losses. These assumptions entail corporations portray the private reforms and the public sphere, and reshifting the idea of corporations as part of it. The last to recognize corporation an important role in addressing war regulation should be considered a due active governance. Antitrust provide incentives for reforms to pursue public goals, mitigation, antitrust means to mitigate power wielded by large corporations, and necessary only way for the large firms to be expected to comply with environmental regulations. It is not enough to come up with answers to the issue of climate change without a possible path towards achieving sustainable development through economic and political means. The strength and integration of economics into climate policy is key. That's philosophy 19. Environmental change have large negative consequences. Many people are consuming too little. 10% of the world's population, extreme poverty, the urgent need for further economic development. Economics play a central role in sustainable development. Core questions how to allocate resources. Economics are crucial for understanding positive and negative social impacts of alternatives trade combined with other social and behavioral science. How must it be possible to shift behavior? The challenges combined with feasible with the difficult political and social order spread society from getting to sustainable outcomes. Progress requires collaboration, requires institutional political alignment, well beyond knowledge, lack of involvement by economists. These gaps in understanding production, consumption, decision, how to regulate negative environmental impacts. Given the scale of the challenges, urgent need for rapid integration of economics into sustainable development. The plan is necessary. Corporations are driven by profit incentives in part, and allowing mergers and monopolies makes solving the climate change risk impossible. That should go in 21. More combinations of individual firms are ultimately driven by profit motive. Rate of return leads to forward-looking behavior. Firms are interested in sustainability to increase their profitability. Companies strive for profit maximizing their competition will only increase. Stricter combination laws are possibly associated with CSR. This link is stronger in countries where consumers are pro-environment attitudes. The competition is a stronger driver. R&D merger reduces innovation. That allowing the firms to coordinate is the lowest level of sustainability. Where firms coordinate prices, sustainable levels are lower than competition. Coordinating allows companies to collude on prices. Even a total shift in individual attitudes about climate change would benefit from a more competitive economic environment. That's your goal. And turn 21. If firms operate with intrinsic motivation, investments range higher in competition. The difference become larger. Coordination reduces intrinsically motivated green investment. Loss of profit due to increasing sustainability beyond normal profit is larger for firms who jointly discuss sustainability. Intrinsic motivation makes anti-competitive agreements less suitable to promote sustainability, and that's sufficient to solve. Establishing a basis for green antitrust policy creates government leverage for large-scale climate action. That shouldn't. And turn 21. The green antitrust solution to force market participants to internalize externalities. Market forces are harnessed to benefit the government welfare. Taking into account through intergenerational altruistic first and foremost, governments has to ensure social costs reflected through taxation by ensuring private property rights are well-defined. Governments can use direct regulation, mandating private companies increase their price by overcharge, use that money to finance and compensating public good. Emission mitigation policy as an early mover is key to future abatement and preventing lock-in, solves leakage and green paradox. RIO and Carousel 15. A pioneering region adopting more stringent emission reduction may be needed to strengthen climate mitigation, and the impact not come from following abatement. Promote 2030 carbon leakage is limited to below 60%. Carbon leakage not strongly impacting emission reduction. Gaming from the early mover action does not increase lock-in from fossil fuel infrastructure from in other regions. Conversion technologies can easily replace alternatives. Leakage is limited due to trade-off costs. That light implementation of carbon tax lead to more larger losses. Global cooperation may prove illusory in the short run. Credible and strong integration by major countries can help keep the door open. Even small carbon price increase impact behavior that changes consumption patterns and is empirically proven. Who 11. British Columbia's carbon tax is small. Pricing proves to decline consumption. There are many consumers in the market making decision. Companies respond to change in price as fossil fuel uses, studying the likelihood that people adjust a small price change in the fossil fuel prices so well established and almost rises to the level of an economic maximum. Economists have been studying aggregate responses, so it might be misleading for individuals to examine their own personal situation. The point is how much all consumers change. Pragmatism is better than purity, especially true in climate politics. Rich and 16. The green advocates have preferred confrontation and compromise. Rejection of compromise even better than the DNA of radical movement. Purity is often priced for pragmatism, pending fuel efficiency, automation standards, or successful models. Incremental gain results in regulation being solved as a mistake. Incremental progress is progress, and progress is what is urgently needed. Working within the system is necessary to solve particular instances of climate change. There's no guarantee revolution will solve that guarantee. And 13. The climate crisis appears the sum of all environmental problems. Deforestation, overfishing, soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, halting GHGs, and much more specific problem. The most pressing steps of the larger political environment dealing with climate change by radical social transformation. Be it socialist or anarchist would be a very long and drawn out multi-generational struggle marked by use of mass education, organizing a scale not seen since the 1930s. Nor is there any agreement that uses one also finite itself addicted to coal and oil. The history of social democracy in Latin America dependent on petroleum. More radical approach begins not with long-term vision. These are real parameters of politics. Analyzing climate scenarios galvanizes motivation to support climate-friendly policies and generates individual and collective responsibility to combat climate change and reorganizes the societal structures that trap individual efforts into ineffective climate solutions. That's drawn in 21. Simulation helps people understand the decision-making which contribute to climate change. So people who participate in simulation work on their knowledge. Reporting more motivation to help them perform more mitigating behaviors. Believes that predictors' willingness to act support climate-friendly policy motivation is higher for participants as well as post-simulation active motivation. When simulation participants feel pro-climate behaviors consistent with their goals, part of the identity that feels good to be more likely to perform pro-environmental action for a longer duration. Simulation increases protection behaviors, so likely donate money or time to invitation to support climate-friendly initiatives. Consistent volunteering suggests that our simulation may be generalizable across multiple behaviors. These types of public behaviors can be influenced on policy behavior bridges individual and collective to mitigate warming challenges at all levels of your products. So it's vital scientists study both actions at the individual level and larger collective effort. Participants recognize personal responsibilities, need to collectively change structures own constrained decision. Participants act on their own knowledge. Participants necessary change in simulation is constrained by the social pressure structure of society, such as economic system regulation, not reward climate protective decisions. Participants may be encouraged motivated to move away from the trap situation, powerful enough to motivate action. Strategic use of market mechanisms to politicize the inequalities of the status quo is possible. Radical system change alone is a demand for a clean slate that we don't have. That's often. And 16. Capitalism is designed by human beings so it can evolve. It is worth noting that capitalism can work with successful. The world's population increased by 4, the world economy by 14, global per capita income tripled, life expectancy increased by 2/3. advance in medicine, shelter, food, regulations evolve to address monopoly, collusion, price fixing. Today, one of those needs to respond to climate change. Neoclassical economics has been built on extreme simplification of human beings, untrustworthy experimental economics that range offer questions about utility. There's a growing attention to those metrics. How we get to the solution for climate change to require systemic change. To argue for creating a new system to reduce capitalism. The nature of social change never allows us for the clean slate. That's sweeping statements for radical change attractive. Every set of institutional evolved structures that precede it. We cannot simply invent a new system. Commerce must evolve out of the form we have at present. We cannot feel increasing global mean temperatures. We cannot link an individual weather anomaly with global climate change. The real appreciation of the issue requires an understanding of large-scale system. Market is the most powerful institution on earth. You can lament it, but it's a fact. Business is not leading the way towards a carbon neutral world. There will be no solutions. Economic valuation is key to environment and climate politics. Philosophy in 12. Quantitative evaluation never be perfect. Some suppose the best value provides information to help guide decision-making. Environmental policy requires decision-making to compare apples and oranges. Benefit cost calculations transform a complex multi-dimensional problem to a single dimension that can be ranked alternatives and monetary metrics, intuitive, easily observable. Any decisions entails winners and losers. How should groups be treated? One way is to give high weight to those with less wealth. An equity weight argument would mean equal damages. Climate change would be given greater weight. Low income countries. The alternative would be to delegate judgment of relative value, information about potential outcomes, vital policy decision-making. Environmental management involves trade-offs. Making decision trade-offs involves value judgment. Radical alternatives pave the way for environmentalism that is net more aggressive. That's how it would 04. Those from the authoritarian end of the spectrum will convince people that liberal mainstream is inherently incapable of reform, must be replaced by more corrosive from a green politics. Radical left provides no realistic alternative, thus leaving the door open for Leviathan or Oblivion School, nakedly authoritarian, radically hierarchical programs. It would be better for such powerful skills. It would be better if those with such powerful skills. That's the Hellwood evidence.
Okay. You ready?
Mhm.
All right. My first question: what is the total welfare standard?
The total welfare standard is a standard that stands in conjunction to the consumer welfare standard. It requires companies to take a more holistic impact of their behaviors
That
on
sounds
society.
great. So what counts as a holistic impact?
So, for example, if you have a coal plant that has emissions, and then courts calculate those emissions have a certain social cost, those have to be internalized.
Okay, so those social costs have to be internalized. At what equilibrium point do we determine that that social cost has been met?
I mean, obviously, it would require assigning values in part to things like a social cost of a ton of carbon.
Okay, so how do we assess that social cost? What's the monetary value conversion?
Of course, it requires some simplification. We've had several pieces of evidence from the most qualified academics in relation to carbon taxes. It's possible to do that. British Columbia has done it. Other countries have done it.
Defines total welfare?
Sorry. Yeah, I would look at the Miyazaki card.
Is it this first card?
Yeah, total welfare is aligned with universal ownership.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, the market reality is that people own things universally. It doesn't really standardize the way the courts would resolve this. Like, is there a piece of evidence that you think says the court would narrowly align this so that the carbon tax would?
You looked at it for 10 seconds. It's pretty good. The whole article is about why we need a total welfare system. Broadly, companies should internalize the cost of their externalities. You're right. It's a complicated economic justification. The same way the CWS.
Is there any case where a company's economic operations and the value they give to the GDP would overcome that social cost?
Well, that's part, yes, but that's part of the benefit they would produce. So it's a cost benefit calculation.
So how do you rationalize that? Why is the benefit they provide to the GDP able to outweigh the social cost?
Well, so for example, if they pay the tax on carbon, they can continue emitting that carbon. They just have to do so at a level that is an equilibrium for their costs.
Okay, so why wouldn't they just raise the price to the consumers?
So we have a couple pieces of evidence about this. If you want to take this, Julian, why wouldn't they just raise the costs? One argument is that it reduces demand for their products. There's a competitive market to not do that. Second is that if they do that, they still have to pay the tax. So either way, it discourages that behavior. Third is that at the margins, that will reduce consumption by consumers. So even if firms do that, it doesn't reduce their demand.
Okay, so the emissions are like done in developing countries like China and like I don't know, like another country where we have mass industrial production.
Yeah.
Does the plan tax imports of carbon?
Yeah, BTA would be part of the plan.
Okay, cool. Another thing I want to ask about is how does the United States unilaterally taking a carbon tax measure solve global climate change?
So first is you've read several amazing pieces of evidence about the importance of mitigation. 3 degrees is better than 4, which is better than 5. So we do not need to win international solvency. The second claim is we have read several pieces of evidence about the United States as a climate policymaker, and it says that what the United States does is important. It affects other countries' decisions. It can set signal in things like even if France doesn't implement a carbon tax, it might be more likely to follow through their Paris commitments.
It's kind of bizarre to me. So like what? So you think the other piece of evidence is that China will begin to adopt a carbon tax because of the plan?
Again, I think in reaction to the plan, climate policies become a lot more realistic in China's eyes and become a lot more important for their own geopolitical position. But again, we don't need to win all this. A lot of it's external from the app or incidental.
Conversion, of course.
Thank you. Set 3 the case. Getting spicy. 3.
In here, all over mine.
Oh,
Speed demon.
More than I can do.
Yo, I don't even know if I can do it. We'll probably have to skip the 3rd.
That's cool with us.
Wait a minute. Yo, this stamp is in top condition.
Couple years underused, you know?
True. Super true. Oh, good. Okay. Okay, we all good? Awesome. You good?
Yeah.
The United States federal government should establish an upstream carbon fee on greenhouse gas emissions with all revenue reimbursed as dividends to the population that rises with the federal estimates of the social cost of carbon deployment of a solar radiation management policy which adjusts the radiative forcing in response to GHG emissions and average yearly temperature increases, adjusts aerosol deployment relative to observed ozone and weather disruptions. It solves and is phased down after which solves our impact towards Keith and McMartin. In 15, we articulate a scenario with insufficient detail to allow quantitative analysis of the answers to meet the following criteria temporary and in that the input is zero as our responsibility to that is specifically recognized that the amount of SRM will be adjusted in light of new information, just as SRM ready of forcing to us to have the rate of growth of net non-SRM anthropogenic radiative forcing use stratospheric aerosol SRM with even as possible as the global distribution of radiative forcing that means counters offer lower ozone impact, lower overall health impact, more or less CPS standard with the transition to advanced particles by 2050 for any stabilized emissions pathway for greenhouse gases in the above scenario, at least to finite time deployment of SRM carbon tax alone is sufficient. Kaufman at all. 16. Electricity produces more greenhouse gases than the other sector for the U.S. to meet its emission targets of fossil fuel. The usage of the electricity sector must be significantly curtailed by reliable alternative carbon pricing can have dramatic effects on emissions in the electricity sector as soon as the policy is implemented. High carbon units will operate less, pricing carbon will induce investments in low carbon technologies, development of which will be crucial. Unlike other sectors, electricity systems are in place to adjust to the carbon price immediately. With the carbon price when it's solar become more competitive with natural gas, we display results around $25 per metric ton, going at 5% per year. The carbon price reduces electricity sector emissions by over 60% is far more likely than a carbon price will cause larger emission reductions that are predicted in these conservative forecasts. Yes, on Veal. Next up. Yes, on Veal. Okay. Plan results in a carbon tariff on imports in order to compensate domestic producers for the cost of the plant deal. And 9, there's one substantial political constraint that requirement that any ETS does not disadvantage American producers' competitiveness. Is a major constraint on American policy. These concerns dominated around our politicians speaking about climate. The U.S. will not be able to implement a policy which imposes costs on the domestic vendors greater than foreign producers. This precludes creation, which does not include a carbon tariff to negate the perceived disadvantages experienced by producers as a result of the domestic scheme. Even if countries are not binding American policymakers act as that they are given their perfectly predictable political constraints and risk-averse politicians may decline to gamble. Carbon tariffs, collapse global trade, and WTO legitimacy. Penny. And 15, if Congress agrees to impose carbon pricing and then change charges for cost of foreign importers, it would be unilateral protections and a right violation. WTO rules such legislative rights that promote that protest the depression. WTO rules recognize no right to offset the domestic producers such a blatant violation would undermine the Bretton Woods system, which remote trade liberalization. The measures are allowed only in response to actions initiated elsewhere. Rules do not recognize the right to level the playing field in response to initiative originating at home. The U.S. would be challenged at the very least. The policies would be unfair to developing states that cannot afford such as the U.S. and carbon fee would create a conflict in WTO and global trade negotiations. It's not likely that Asia would accept such a policy and lead to a trade war with the largest partner of the U.S. Maybe first of all, like the tax in exporting sectors undermining the policy of the U.S. would expect retaliatory fees while the case is being worked out causes global hotspot escalation. Trade is key to solve. Superior and 14 with Pacific and European trade negotiations and underway. Dire developments are threatening security. Israel or Iraq have been overrun wars, and Syria rages Israeli-Palestinian peace is in tatters. Nuclear negotiations with Iran have run into trouble issues. Heightened tensions in the SES. Nuclear on North Korea remains unpredictable. Russian comment and stability in Ukraine. Advancing trade liberalization to stabilize key regions, strengthen security following World War II with the Midwest arrived trade, diffusing tensions. Every day, America is unwilling to temporarily result to lead weaken our nation, strengthening security by cementing economic alliances is imperative. Failure to act could undermine stability in key regions. Next up, economy strong now. Schneider, for one, fear that the more Ukraine would tilt the U.S. economy is given way to continuing a steady return to normal. The labors of like concerns continue to fade. The job market is on a solid trajectory as robust demand. Both more workers with a stable wage growth. More tightly settled on the bond market remain hit. It's premature to start the recession. This does not look like a late cycle economy. A mid-cycle economy at the business cycle is running around the Fed circuit remains far below the level that would discourage investment. Antitrust smothers economic recovery. Ribnisec in 11 proposals to extend the years of the economy version to emanate our capital markets. Reduce innovation, frustrating economic growth, precisely the runtime recovery during an ongoing pandemic. The GDP prevailed noted nearly 85% of virtual challenges win rate only increase over more recent cases because the legal standards of federal legislation would lower. The standard is not an ideal, giving greater discretion would reduce the investment side of fuel growth. CWS promotes business growth. Standard for in 20 punishment fee for those that rate questions are prevented new goods. CWS has helped the economy with innovations to reduce the cost of living and improve products made it harder for businesses to do their races not through the worst economic crisis and matter remaining competition free of the threat of arbitrary government meddling extinction scared us in 20 the global economy and molecular depression the changing power possibilities for conflict are expanding with growth of China and Russia. Dominance cannot be taken for granted. China has been catching up. Modernizing carriers are vulnerable to Russia and China hypersonic game over the pandemic brought severe contraction. However, China has been less offended and will maintain a better response. Took him out better off the pandemic cases tolerated the declining U.S. power. The risks include multiple arms races, hypersonic cyber weapons, AWS in space. Adversity can allow for many mishaps and accidents to scribble these civil war country and Eurasia, Africa, and America becoming battlegrounds for conflict. Case. 5 minutes. Nothing can do. All right. 1. No warming impact. Should turn framing warming as an existential threat depoliticizes action turns the case. Osaka, Yoder, and 20 scientists. Think of climate and existential threat is misleading for warming. Which becomes self-sustaining is not our understanding. None. We must keep worrying forever. Problem with that existential threat narrative might bring horses that it's too late to do extinction rebellion. Receive criticism for talents will trip another version of competition. It means that. And they might not live to adulthood. Such a message might push people in the eco anxiety. They feel various levels of depression that they are going to die because of competition. Activists need to stop thinking about competition and so should move towards a more like a timber switch. Scientists criticize the rhetoric that humans have until 2030. It might be too late to meet 1.5 degrees, yet any amount will help a less overheated planet won't cause changes in the survival of the human species. 2 bad forecasts. O'Brien in 19, the FNCA finds no existential threat under a worst case scenario. The economy will suffer less than 1% of GDP. Such as the bad initial conditions matter a lot, similar to climate models on rates forecasting would seem to be non-existing chaos theory for good reasons that meteorologists can't forecast the coming winter. Consumers have been eating less beef, buying recycled materials. Forecasters assume no tech progress on efficiency, sequestering carbon. 3, no feedback loops. Nicholas et al. In 20, science revolves around tipping points. Albedo is not existential. Warming expected is about 0.15. Concentrated in the Arctic to dismiss hundreds of scientists is bold. Warming so far equates with 0.4 degrees Celsius. 1/3 is due to the emissions of nitrous oxide. This estimate is likely 2 times too large. Excess warming would not only occur if the Arctic or would only occur if the Arctic became ice-free all year round. 2016 more condemned low variability and extreme prediction by outlier scientists. Warming will be modest, of which half will already happen and won't happen in one sudden jump. Exceedingly unlikely. McGrath in 20 worst case. For reasons is no longer possible. This scenario assumes a 500% increase. According to the Awesome State, they did a good job of communicating the limitations of climate scientists. A lot of clean tech policies. Our prices have fallen by factors of 5. Media has tended to use the highest impacts when reporting on projections. 5, too far off Bardelli in 20. Scientists on climate will destroy the planet by 2030. Scientists are now predicting heading the headlines of use like bits to fuel the Armageddon. More for every reason, not a magical kind of point. There's never land from suffering, nor from catastrophic. The world will not end in 10 years due to climate change. 6, no impact to even multiple tipping points. Nicholas et al. In 20 took the speculative think piece, which made a suggestion that a detailed numerical study backed up by new modeling the lowest temperature was 2 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial times, which we have not reached. Uncertainty will likely place that limit much higher. The timescale of centuries to millennia. Feedbacks are to be can only provide a finite amount of additional warming before all the ice is melted. It lends no way to societal collapse. 7, China will keep emitting. BBC in 21. China emits more than the entire developed world combined. China emitted 27%, the US at 11%, while India third with 6.6%. China more than tripled over the 3 decades. Per person emissions have increased, tripling over 2 decades. 1,058 coal plants, more than half the world's capacity. ECON 8, Pandora's box. The planet lacks every politically motivated test or in 19. The TWS offers a rigorous framework and address the language of the Sherman Act, lets itself to interpretation and viewing it with limitless scope and universal plays vast political discretion in the hands of enforcer and the answer test floodgates. No litigation facilitate deleterious tendencies and politically motivated enforcement and would unlock a Pandora's box of concerns.
So for me to figure out what exactly. Dang, you've gotten faster.
Dog, no, it was like 3. Oh, also their internal link is bad. Their evidence is, does not substantiate anything that they were talking about across that spillover for this thing. And then this is where inverse solvency, Dorsey et al. 19 intercrossed the removal and rent-seeking, including the misallocation versus less efficient for diversion energy, including the offensive and defensive enforcement pay. The other act in a way that aligns with her objectives, incorporating Pinkel's only necessity early actions indicates of public interest. Factors fail to explain significant percentage of enforcement, so people will most hand out around competitions that is unmoored from a set of subject-specific limitations. Well, okay, you might be right about that. What page do you want that, Oscar?
Just put it on the econ.
It'd be great if we could get those cards. Well,
Yeah, of course. Let me.
It'd be great if we could.
Yes.
Then let me find that other card that we read. All right. Sorry, this is taking a while.
We'll take some tech time.
Is there tech time in this one?
There should be.
There should be.
Yeah, the
Yeah, okay.
cards are set.
And then you down for it, slowly moving.
Yeah.
Oh,
Damn.
true though.
I'm okay. Well,
Two.
okay, 933.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all good for cross-six?
Yeah.
Status of the counter plan?
Conditional.
Does the counter plan enact a BTA?
Yeah.
Okay, so the carbon tariffs is not a net benefit. Just BISCON?
Well, I mean, the first plank is not a net benefit to the BISCON DA. We have a second plank about SRM management.
Okay, so you can kick planks.
Yeah.
And so the last three are conditional, and if you go for those three planks, the tariffs then is a net benefit.
Yeah, the 3 planks links to the tariffs DA altogether.
The 3 pins avoid planks. Okay, gotcha. The only difference between the counter plan and the AF is you don't use antitrust policy.
Yeah.
And then you have those other planks, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I just want to ask about that in the context of the link. Like the counter plan also taxes every company, and that wouldn't hurt business confidence.
Well, it maintains a focus on price. Like if a company prices a product at a certain service, then it can be permissible as activity. That
wait, so do you change the consumer welfare standard then?
It doesn't. Yeah, it's price is still the way that we assess
Wait,
economic activity.
It's weird though. So you do a carbon tax. I understand that, but the carbon tax still levies taxes on companies for emissions, right?
Yeah.
And the
But
link.
it does not dissolve companies on the basis of like social cost theory, which is what we're picking out of.
Okay, I understand that, but it's just like you read obviously a generic link of that business
I
people
think-
really
I
hate
think
regulation.
Our link cards are specific to CWS. I don't agree with that characterization.
Okay, gotcha. Now I want to ask about the last 3 planks. It seems like your evidence is discussing the planks in conjunction with the carbon tax. Why would those solve independently?
What?
Like SRM, all the last 3 planks. Like why does that solve emissions independently of a carbon
Oh
tax?
yeah, well, I'm not a scientist. I don't know like how exactly these models, but these cards say that SRM would be an effective way to deflect the heat back from our atmosphere, which results in intermediate climate change.
Gotcha. I want to ask about the BTA argument now. So is your argument that in retaliation to the plan, other countries would also increase tariffs?
Well, it's a violation of the WTO, a BTA, a unilateral tariff on carbon emissions.
Yeah. So is the internal link just WTO credibility or is it literal trade war?
Well, both. Like, we think that WTO credibility is one of our internal links
Okay.
to trade war. Also, there's a different
Sure.
retaliation system that we say escalates to reduce interdependence.
Okay. And I want to ask about the internal link to WTO cred specifically. Like we haven't even appointed, Trump didn't appoint the appellate justice. There's no high court of the WTO right now. Why does that not shred WTO cred?
Well, we think that what's written in the rules is a more pressing concern than whatever, administrative stuff.
But there's not literally nobody to enforce the rules right now.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a rank argument. Like,
It's a
people
rank
are
argument.
people are
Your
following-
2015 card?
people are following the rules now.
Yeah. Okay.
And the plan would prevent them from doing so. The fact that there's no administrative agent that forces people to get back in line is a reason why the entire system is kind of
Okay.
fragile. I mean, I don't know.
And real quick, there's no advocacy or anything on case, right? It's all just.
We'll take prep 933.
This doesn't make it. I told him to keep the other last. So this is my third date. This is my third date maybe judging from another embracer. Very nice. Very nice. You concluded that the functionality was fine.
I'm probably gonna read it, but I don't know.
I think I'm good. Okay, stop, bro. 7:42. What's that? I'm not this tall.
I'm sorry.
There.
I know.
How'd you do that? I'm so impressed.
What?
Good job with it.
Oh, fuck. Wait.
See? I don't know.
Right after you're like, this is a perfect stand. Nothing's ever happened.
Predictions fail.
Predictions
fail.
Engineers in here.
Okay, fine.
So clearly it's
Wait,
this
wait,
level
wait,
that's not right. It's between here and here.
Oh,
Don't just
Kevin
strong
is-
arm it down. I know you're strong. I'm scared.
What? Okay, it's the only hope.
Wait, whoa, wait, what's going on?
You're strong.
No, I can't do it.
You can. You were twisting it. You were hardly even twisting it.
I got it.
You go to the gym every day.
I'll just set this whole thing up. Just be like, I got it. It's easy.
It's like jams.
Whoa,
Legend! Thank you. I
That's
tried.
what follows like what happened there. Wait, it's over already.
Yes.
What a good debate to stream. I hope the audience at home is entertained.
Probably like 6 people in there.
Yeah, literally.
There's only one person in the Zoom call. I'm not unmuting for them.
Oh.
I put in the chat, hey, there's a YouTube stream. Please go to that, not this. All right, the order. It's case, the counter plan, the trade DA, the econ DA. Pretty simple stuff. All right, is everybody good? Excellent. Every single argument for the treaty is only terminal impact defense, not actually the solvency of our scenario, carbon tax, and overall renewable technology through increased green antitrust, able to solve the entirety of U.S. mitigation, create a global norm and a precedent towards change. They can see the solvency of green antitrust is resolved and answer the counterplans necessary to predict and that gauge and things like pollution and price fixing. That's bad for companies directly. Climate change collapses the ability for structural life. One, we never said extinction. We just said that climate change causes massive harms. The IPCC 2022 evidence is not doomism, but from the best scientists claiming a scenario framing issue for all their case cards is about climate alarmism. We're citing scientists saying that's a real problem because of fucking course it is. Second, they're just talking about a couple instances of bad science, not the IPCC 2022. Third, yes, we are able to solve. If there is one physics student saying that feedback loops do not exist, yes, they do. Look at methane cycles of permafrost in the Arctic, even beyond 0.15 degrees Celsius. It is sufficient to trigger massive scenarios of feedback loops. Regardless, the evidence is pretty damning here that it does cause extinction. 4, this exceedingly unlikely card that they describe is not true. It's not actually from climate scientists. It's not actually describe the scenario from global warming. Only Dumas report. Same for 5 and 6. The 7th card is about international emissions being bad. Sure, that may be true, but they can see the fact that because a mass decrease in mitigation in the U.S. is sufficient to trigger it. China is not enough alone. They would be able to adopt it as well. The evidence is good. The green antitrust cards are all incredibly specific rather than of being necessary to solve. Here's another card. Tipping points do exist in cause extinction. That's Brad 19. Tipping points are actually the permafrost loss and the large scale Amazon drought. Seas may rise by 25 meters. Population subject to the lethal heat conditions beyond the threshold of human variability. The glacial loss rate 70% of gentrification is severe. The ecosystem collapse, including coral reef, rainforests in the Arctic. A billion people are displaced. Agricultural becomes unviable. Food prices skyrocket. Nations will be overwhelmed by challenges like diseases flooding around the world. Our conflict is likely. Nuclear war is possible. Counterplan. Perm to the planet. Half these achieved. First, deploy solar radiation management, please. Second, adjust the radiative force response to GHG emissions. Third, adjust the air sort of relative to the observed ozone. That perm solves any internal net benefit. because we are independent to solve. The plan was bigger than just a carbon tax. It was also total welfare. PERM do both. PERM do the counterplan. The counterplan is the plan. Then enforcement, even if they try to pick out of antitrust action, they would have to change the economy wide as well. Zero net benefit. BizCon, they tax literally every company in the environment, which will kill the economy if they have to. Antitrust is tiny in comparison to a reconsideration of what the environment works out. Can't solve versus BTA. Cross by their China card from case. It only applies from one country, so they'll shift to overseas as a whole. There's no reason why we'd be able to apply to other countries shifting internationally. Second, 12 concentration leading conservative or welfare in the books. 17, environmental sustainability. That's sign on and stuck in 19. Emerged evidence points to the competition, higher markets, greater concentration, the widening wealth through income, inequality, interest law. Supposed to deal with the country, economic power laws, ideologues have narrative substance antitrust. If the U.S. continues in terms of biology, these right firms, the concentration and hard capitalism, increase in competition will decrease the profits. Will continue to fall. The fewer hands, trends reversible. If we restore the antitrust security of effective competition, offer effective competition and antitrust standard replace the prevailing consumer welfare standard, restores the primary aim of antitrust laws. 3 is mergers. They'll drive up profits of consolidation, even if the tax happens. That's Hanley and 21. When the Congress initially acted as service and technical protected service workers to box towards economies and means of judiciary to strip and substitutes on just for the consumer welfare or basic Congress attempts of economic liberty. The values of rest are determined by the elected legislators. Lower course pushes CWS in violation of the precedent. The economization of antitrust led, but as courts believe that Harvard sure beneficial society and consumers emerge led to higher prices in even a reduced input. The Congress must start by reclaiming control of the clear rules to ensure exclusionary conduct and simplify litigation, ban on companies, restrict mobility of workers, ensure the markets are publicly accommodate rules-based laws to ensure the judiciary is adhering to the Congress directive. Judiciary views ambiguities, opportunity to fill the gaps ideology. A bright line will lead to effective enforcement. 4 regulations. 4. As term deployment causes arms racing and balkanization, as Allison, and 21, unilateral geoengineering give rise to significant security hazards, notably the breakdown of international co-op, could drastically alter weather patterns, creating conflicting interest between China and India, sun block that affects the entire planet, relatively close, successful to a wide variety of factors. And that's fine. And no, that's fine. Okay, yeah, that's good. WTO. 1, global warming collapses trade, erects sea lanes and causes economic disruption. Scarcity outweighs the benefits of trade. Second is that the most comprehensive study proves that there's no protection spile that's key at all. And 13, changes in the OTRI across the crisis period allowed to quantify the drop in the trade. The previous literature tends to focus on the average tariff increases in trade policy protectionist. The vice not been able to play a substantial role in the global collapse of trade for the U.S. although there shows between roughly the same throughout the period of analysis. Spikes in anti-dumping duties caused the or TRI increase 0.5 percentage points. The trade policy goes by 2% sharp drop in the world trade. The protectionism is not the main culprit behind the collapse of world trade. Proven by Trump is far larger than anything the plan caused by BTA, which is already announced and signaled. The plan doesn't end economic independence, which is the threshold for their internal link card. No tipping point protectionism. Those go over to one WTO step to the other. That's Patel and 14 members of the WTO launched the negotiations to limit the winter by solar robotics and other environmental goods produced in the countries and the trade environmental goods have grown over the past 5 years, and several of the WTO members have launched legal action to settle the allegations of unfair subsidization and other agreements. 3, the plan doesn't violate WTO rules. 18 points environmental exception, that's shall. And 14, the WTO allows the importing countries to impose differences duties with meet their environmental constraints under the environmental exception. The introduction of carbon tax could avoid the tariffs. Visa points economy-wide taxes, only value-adding this calendar. And 15, where they imported the such as the BTA should oppose the CT use in the same measurements the position of tax non WTO problems because the taxes would be calculated on the same basis as the domestically produced products. The WTO rules not permit a zero rating by choice would provide clear unless the CT exemption and taxation would mean that the U.S. producers not suffer from a competitive disadvantages. No impact to legality. The WTO does not break down because they still would exist afterwards. The unilateral carbon tax actually clarifies the WTO solves legitimacy. That's Kendall and 12. If the WTO is legitimate, there's an obvious need to rely on exemptions. The unilateral adoption is not a result of the loss of competitiveness through a destination-based BTA. The countries adopt similar taxes. Unanimous agreement is not required to hold out the problems are less likely that more nations oftentimes like international pressure to increase on those that do not. This is likely to generate quicker action address emissions. The unilateral actions will likely approach a resolution than waiting for a middle of your agreement. Pass over left the issue unresolved. Provide authority to proceed implementation without the concern of legal initiatives with this illegal does not represent a clarification of existing language. A carbon tax BTA is tenable under existing WTO. Actually, go back to the counter plan. Conditionality. It's a reason to reject the team that shifts Nick stress as his coverage over class, striking axing cells, attachment cells, to favor the neg too much. Vote national third by education and fairness, the pre-round condo, or dispo. The red card says that carbon tax fails alone. That card is wrong. It's only setting one off compared to the conclusive evidence from the 1AC that shifts mitigation forces in the U.S. shifting prices as a whole. That is sufficient to be able to solve the other missions aren't needed. Econ. First, cross-apply all the arguments from the counterplan why CWS will fail now. The status quo is terminally unsustainable due to environmental constraints that we are reaching. Here's more arguments. Oil will peak in 2025, triggering a global transition to renewables. That's Miller 21. What if we can 2025 transition away from reward is happening soon? The prices spike across the globe, search and demand top by lock cash flow type of the key supply and low investment in production. Recessions inevitable. Fed will raise rates now. That's Ruger and 331. And inflation cost 3.4% sharply. Higher price for food, the gasoline, other necessities, largest year-over-year rise since 1982. The core inflation lies 5.4%. The demand confined to the shortage of fuel. The sharpest price ups in number 4 decades. The inflation will worsen spending of 4.4 last month. The Fed's rate will be making borrowing more expensive and weaken the economy over time. If higher gasoline prices are sustained, will eventually to spending in other areas. The economy is suspected that inflation is peaking in the coming months. This cost of the lowest it's ever been, proven by Ukraine. That's Kelly and 3-2. Invasion of Ukraine pushed the business confidence to its low level since 1994. More than 4 out of 10 rent disruptions. Employment figures so down compared to pre-pandemic levels. Thumpers. Anti-justice already massively happening now. Let's pass in 1/4. Contemplates doing changes to the aim of the selling merchants against the charge of going road. The FTC sharp away from the deceptions making investigation and truth and less predictable. We review the FTC minefields warning letters after the closing of HSR periods more intensive merger investigation under the process enough from the labor. The FTC rescinded along same policy changes to the virtual merchant acquisition withdrawal from the merger guidelines, rescinding CWS investigations relating to the no poach agreements and their ballooning. That's become another engagement like comes intense and uncertain. The real, maybe in 2022. The econ scenario is wrong. We're going to win straight up for the carbon tax is net good for the economy. First, warming turns growth and creates new poverty traps, extreme weather, sea level rise, damage to crop production, collapse the economy, that's world in 15. Climate change radically damage the global economy, slow growth, and nothing done to slow the pace. Research found that the warming will leave global GDP lower, 23% lower. The studies not account for the sea level rise storms or the effects beyond warming, the minimizing global temperature rises to minimize loss by 250 trillion. Second, the plan solves national debt. That's Williamson Whitman 15. If the U.S. faces the fiscal deficits, the projections indicate that the debt to GDP ratio are set to rise. The large deficits show slow economic growth, driving up interest rates and crowding up the private investment, and taxes rates are need to rise to carry the growth increase. But the risk of debt crisis, the benefits using carbon tax and revenue to cut the deficit, exceeding those of using revenue to cut other taxes. The deficit is currently higher. Sustainable is more effective to raise additional revenue now. 3, it saves the GDP to debt ratio that scale. 15. An increase in tax will not slow the long-term economic growth. The tax changes including holding other factors constantly reduce the growth. However, other factors are not constrain the reduction in the deficit tends to raise the public saving, which results in higher national saving. Mark the card national saving. No impact to economic finance. Clarity 15. Economic stress associated with conservatory policies and rivals terminate during economic downturns. This is true for peaceful relations between opposed rival terminations, transition where what conflicts are viewed as severe to real conflict or economic crisis leads to conciliatory behaviors. Economic crisis leads to austerity when production diminishes the revenues, diminishes the politics welfare state, returns to treacherous conspiracy policy making sure to national security spending, pursuing the defense defense may conform to the purposes of the financial sector. The cutback services signal the military threats decline, the breakdown, breaking arms, races global services, civil force reduction, cutback should be dangerous. Mark the card dangerous. There's a lot of cards. I think Aiden's saying them out.
I sent one out, sorry. There's 2, and then I'll send Clary out 2. So
I'd love to go.
let me have one consolidated doc about the cards.
You're asking if you all want a consolidated doc with all the cards.
They're all sent. It was 2 in the email, but I can also put it. I can just put it.
Oh, wait, what?
Bunch of cards off of Aiden's computer. Do you want them consolidated?
Yeah, could you do that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can cross that, right? We don't need to.
We don't have to. We don't have to.
So you're consolidating me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, is this these 2 cards?
Yeah, just
Okay, it's fine. Yeah.
What you know, like these cards? What is it?
The Clary.
Clary's great.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay. 1 bad flower. Is this Fozzie card right on the case? No. Yeah.
Fozzie? It was just the first card that was read. Sprat.
Okay. What is the scientific basis that you've laid out for why tipping points are accurate?
Yes, it's in the IPCC evidence as well as the Sprat evidence. You're citing one physics PhD student saying, here's my analysis for why tipping points don't exist. His calculation is actually pretty wrong if you read them. His reasoning is that apparently smaller degrees of warming would cause tipping points. That must be patently false. That's not true. The science behind tipping points is saying that as climate change increases, as warming is more severe, under a quicker time scale, it causes things like methane.
Why is that true that warming will increase under a quicker time scale?
I'm saying as warming rapidly increases, I mean, if you look at how
Well,
GHG emissions occur over time, the effects of warming, largely exponential changes, especially varying levels of ppm in the atmosphere causes varying effects on the environment. It's actually like an atmospheric chemistry. It changes the radiative forcing is the actual scientific reason, if you want a full explanation of this.
Okay.
I took a whole class on this. It was really fun.
Okay. I don't really care. The
Yes, it's science. I don't know.
Can't lie. The regulation's bad for what reason?
Which,
Chelsea. Kind of fun.
yeah, sorry, bad flower. I gotta do that to you. I didn't read that card.
Awkward. Alright. Oh, and for any of these, case turns DA arguments. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
global warming collapses trade.
I read a whole card, Warland 15, but it's also incredibly obvious if you read the IPCC card. The amount of social tension that will increase in the near future is so enormous. Things like climate refugee flows causing disruption in areas, massive droughts, economic displacement, overall food collapse, all of that will massively hurt trade. Of course.
Okay.
The question is timescale, and we'll probably win that the long-term effect is more important.
Last line of questioning, not to be, that guy, but where's the line for spillover
The line?
in 1AC?
So you may think that didn't have enough, but I read a really good card in the 2AC about spillover, and it was the Candle 12 card.
Okay.
Really good about BTA.
Is that the only card?
No, of course not.
Okay.
It's in a bunch of cards in many places.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
wondering.
Like
I'm wondering for
BTA,
the
like so what's the question? If a BTA happens or if it spills over to other countries adopting it,
Yeah, why it's true.
why BTA will happen?
No.
Why spill over to other countries will happen?
Mhm.
I mean, I can control F it. I remember it being in a card. It's in like one of the Shrink Controller cards.
Okay.
I mean, pointing a
If
line.
you don't know what it is, it's not.
I
gonna
can spend the
get
next 30 seconds looking for it. I mean,
That's fine. I'm not gonna ask another question.
I'm not gonna do that.
Okay. Then we'll just
No, that's too annoying. I read a really good card on it. I'm good.
Whatever. I was dead ass serious that I'm not gonna ask another question. We're just running it out.
Yeah, you're good. I assume prep starts at the end. Right. All right, that's process time. Prep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, what? It was literally a blank card.
No, why? They're wrong. You did just say that. Like, where's number one is that? Yeah, IPCC.
No.
Yeah. Just got to paste it in the video. We took 418.
542.
What's that?
542.
Yeah.
Assuming you understand.
Okay. The order is econ DA, protectionism. We're not counterplan, protectionism, econ DA.
Kind of econ or protectionism. That we're
Protectionism, econ.
Can you repeat it one more time? I'm asking so.
Counterplan, protectionism, econ.
Okay, perfect. Did not process that for some reason. I heard 3 different directions in that. Okay, I need to pull the cards, sorry.
Oh shit, can't do that. No cap.
Loading.
Okay, y'all good?
No, sorry. I'm good now. Just loaded.
Okay, we good? All right.
The counterplan solves the app and immediately establishes sufficient carbon tax with PS, the best version of the internal link, but avoids this app by maintaining is the anti-trust wars framing issue. The internal link is carbon tax good, not anti-trust expansion good, so any possible choice deficit is contrived and divorced from the 1AC. The permutation, they don't touch the CWS, that is our net benefit, which is the reason why it doesn't link to the innovation is that permutation do both in counterplan separate the 1AC because it gets rid of the anti-trust component of the one of the app. Links in that benefit. One, CWS counterplan maintains a focus on price and registers the role of business as purely the effect of the consumer. It's closely aligned with business operations and does not disrupt the international organization, internal organization of the company. That's our link argument. 2, sufficient to shield. Also 19, are shorted for several absolute compensation, including responsibility for everything, sort of the innovation, also the analysis, correct, with the first compensation privacy. First, negotiate with the race, and second, variety of prices, compete with the quality of the report. It's found for the approach data when nobody saying combination quality justifies that. Accuracy, 415, airline markets. 3, most precise, politically agnostic, and targeted. Dorsey 19, examining single factors and standard for causing bullshit probably the way. The big factors that are inconsistent with also weapons interest this way to low prices. The important question that whether the standard is better or worse than it this question of policies of the first methodology leads to consistency. Although personal physical framework although personal practice reveals random changing robust standard cases show most effective all quality of variety innovation. You see it doesn't implement a BTA, the Kaplan does those CX, you see. While concentration 1 does not even mention the environment, so this is not internal to the F2. No defense of the plan. They cut the straw person that solves the applicant. 1 is each go. Green interest, fight against chemistry. How will you green interest? You may see the combination environment, which is like the market, more something to boost, more sustainable, or the competition, more things. Washington give the party company, the sustainable future issues, there's other responsibility regarding public solutions. 3, carbon tax is sufficient. I guess it should be the links in that benefit debate. 3, carbon tax sufficient transform the economy. And no, you got the North 13. Actually, no, econ D. Retag that card. North House 13. Price election department around by the strong sense of discrimination, carbon price, single consumer with the right. First, low carbon technology costs generally chasing by some lead purchasing. Close to almost have the U.S. government investor company being R&D and sensitive. First, the carbon investment regarding about 75% per year. Cost the U.S. House less than 1%. So, global carbon warming also will possibly all the USC cards saying that carbon taxes do not influence the economy. So, it takes out the links in that benefit argument too. There's no inequality advantage. Dorsey 19, the inequality relying on GDP coefficient, government transfer, and employment benefits, subsidy, cash income, the effect, inequality, finance stuff, including the benefit less than the difference in minor ratio. 1959 was 2012 to see anything. A small housing cost average also shows civil story because the insurance improvement of more information, economic facility, isolated, and also living insurance equality. As far as the cost of the natural regression, do not offer any office essentially force pollution. 3, populace have no project populace has no mass consolidation nor state on there's far evidence that the really anti-trust enforcing increasing constitution and rather than the industries that give the bound policy together against something the first federal system or this argument was above. You can strike down prices if they get too high. Second ones to the app, they don't get rid of these pernicious price effects identified once you crossing the SRM that we're taking that price going for the WTA they were conceived as no impact to trade. However, the fact that the card they read here says that it's impossible for trade partners to ever negotiate bring people to the bargaining table for enhancement of environmental regulations. So that obviously applies to the app and they're trying to China and getting China on board with adopting a carbon tax, which is obviously nonsensical. The economic growth of the Hudson nuclear war depression racks up challenges to the LAO by revisions actions for escalates instability, which manifests in arm racing and geopolitical fights as ship production turns climate top 21 when solar is only cheaper than early stage when it was being viable cost of generation changing increasing cost of risk
Harvard costs the United States takes small fuels, able to technology for sure. People that some of the companies that finance right ocean offer independently crushes the environment through social effects, not succeed, enters conditional range, the use combination, group of covenant meetings, and price system, plot boxes, power for 50% of biodiversity without opportunity to self producer, probably not reserve looking at their resources, minister, probably create a complex, the same belief that business planning climate change. They've also seen the link independently in terms of cases the regulatory capture card that was running the 1NC conceded by the 2AC that regulatory administrators will perniciously interpret the social welfare standard to account for any potential indication of social cost of disadvantage because the litigation cost is massive and would hold business invest in the interim. However, the plan cannot result in a sustainable carbon tax solution, which only the campaign circumvents by fiating it rather than relying on antitrust evaluation. They see the warming turns the economy. One, no carbon forces extreme claim under the relevant time for the disadvantage. We're talking about the next 5 years. The plan would solve that over the course of 3 decades. Through second, the plan cannot solve all of warming, so they can't scale up to the feedback loops necessary to provide economic growth. Second, 2EC2, not unique. Economy is strong now. One, no recession slowdown. We're in the middle of the business cycle. GDP growth is up and investment activities due to investments pre-COVID. That's Schneider. 2, unemployment and labor productivity. Watch on 316. The economy slow down. The people said that unemployment rates are already back to full employment labor for distributing rate starts to pick up in corporate forms. So, was that calculated productivity growth? Data drill labor productivity field. 3, no recession 2022. Economy 2022. Recession come out 2022. The area for they started strong. Consumers have passed rates in this meeting that the inflation, the credit card balance, employment increasing the spending of business, planning cost, the PBR, giving nearly 800 billion for those shut down many homes. Government spend the federal has no risk of deficit. They'll say local governments flush the federal money for risk overblown. Chapter 22. Other than finance, they're probably overblown those risks. Nothing stopping the central bank from adding more temporary push up crashing, more visibility, or themselves AC pressure. There are million fewer workers, eliminate wage inflation. There's still salary gap in 10 years, 3 months. Federal Reserve at 6%. All chance of a recession. They say FTC is doing stuff now. First, union discount plan. The United States federal government is maintaining the consumer welfare standard. Second, FTC was now FTC gives the money. Spending for the inflation of the angels. Battle FTC fights the continue demand rather than business model changes stuff. Difficult to approve the visa hard to do anything to deliver the losses have no impact on Facebook stuff in the future. Also, parametric size their stuff to the length. The total welfare standard crushes economic activity, results in massive litigation disputes. Trying to assess what constitutes a holistic cost. There's a Pandora's box of every possible rationalization of social cost, which causes, of course, the press investment activity that Sandra Dorsey, multi-goal framework product UBS generates into unpredictable enforcement of the advantage scale launching, harnessing the multiple framework, confusing enforcement, only efficient enforcement information, that the consumer should off the employees that real social policies and wage raising better adjusted education, privacy, device, GDOs, that verticalized, not processing quality innovation, but not seeing certain dilution, peace, people, Yeah, for the negative figures and just for accounting for the same features that easily recognize. Quantitative studies confirm antitrust breaks VC markets out of the 19 other association between VC and LG and the energy more best VC offers the anti opportunities examine the merits of virtual wins that also strong association between closing VC activity and asset and channel that VC are the important encouraging investments and growth. 6 exit strategy antitrust and produces productive inefficiencies. That's the solo 21. Including the future resident laws making possible returns investing and more investing VC and existing the art of the actually when IPOs which you say presents our ability to be part of the target is a chicken component which mean reduce the chance that you got AC mission rest of the or to be able to all share over there and so leading to improve investor coordination, create R&Ds and the actions of VCs, multiple investment, venture capital, heat up, rival sustainability, language 2020, transition more sustainable global kind of investment over the sound, not to respect transparency, those go to the direct context and financial history of more role in and these goals enable capital sustainable investment hedge firms associate transfer the price government market efficiency. The next couple of cards about how the carbon tax is good for growth proves no link argument to the econ DA for the account plan. So thank you for that. They say no impact to economic decline. One, the short that does not respond to the short-term scenario. The card is about a regression over the long term. It says that historically speaking, states are not gone to war, but it certainly does not say that the immediate conflict that we identify the one I see is not possible. Second, the current geopolitical situation is the exception, not the rule. Our evidence indicates that there are rising heterogeneous challenges in areas like Syria, Libya, and North Korea, which provide new frontiers for conflict. 3, COVID, economic security architecture, LAO decline, goes nuclear, conflict Q17, big demand for U.S. telling people the U.S. security death, the technology, the protection of reserve, the U.S. security, crisis, AIBs, incorporated culture, the U.S. use of war of God, Center South Asia, the U.S. election, recording China's security, inflation, Iraq was motivated, softening on, trade war to euros, Gaddafi was also bringing away from the dollar, the global reserve currency, the U.S. the dollar was at the end of the IRC, but banning sharp education lost U.S. economic position, that the global reserve currency, the U.S. hedging by part of the antitrust, expansion sees leadership, especially the 5G race, L21, 5G is a critical U.S. legend for rifles and minority war, 5G and next-gen technology, tech leadership, and security hardware, software, backbone systems, and security that U.S. companies and innovation patents, and understanding that all which having companies having 5G race, all U.S. companies race holiday, across the antitrust agent with interrelated tech and standards for IT, aggressive enforcement benefit of foreign military countries, the antitrust by IP predatory enforcement, being able to be accepting high penalties for China, and other states and the ability that 5G sees the dominance of 5G, the 5G are fancy connectivity, which threatening leadership and the risk of security, and the risk and influence of 5G for the U.S. and Russian companies for security risk extinction, Gen 20, I
and 3 training sheet engineering and energy, 5 sheets space, cyber processing, physics, or time cycles, eventually, humanization, community, rotation, region, R6 proliferation, right back to the galaxies, people, direct energy, undermine, culture, stable, being greater, new technological, chapters on those and others before, the water quarterly, rapid shift, offsetting, those two seasons, the rules basis in the US, artists like the maximizes, while mitigating downside risk. Go to the debate. No office, perfect middle course. Now, Mike's in chapter 16. I'm having a middle course with the sale of trouble for America. Chapter 8, individual competition, policy, the shorts, the actually, consumer welfare. But this is an action, there's no record, it's in use. Otherwise, legal words are not final advantage. Also, because we're like using the court, as a vision, only consumer welfare standard, remaining zero portion, the difference in state court implementation.
Great. You have a cross-sex?
Yeah.
What? Perfect. First question I have is about the counterplan and the net benefit. You claim that the carbon tax is able to generate economic revenue that shields the land. Why is this true? Are you just conceding our cards that say this, or is the theory that a carbon tax benefits the economy?
Okay, so one, we think our links are discrete from the question of whether a carbon tax is good.
Sure.
Our cards, or link cards, are about indexing the economy through price, which is the consumer welfare standard.
Yes, but does the carbon
has
tax
nothing to
that
do
you
with that.
described, how does it affect the economy?
Sorry.
How does the counterplan affect the economy?
It implements a carbon tax.
Yes, and how does that affect economic status? Growth, GDP, any core measures, any of that?
You read the cards. How does it do it? Could you explain?
Are you fine with us just having the cards?
Oh, I just.
Great.
What is this line of questioning? Is
Okay,
this-
that's perfect. A question on the DA. No, it's fine. Question on the DA. The part I'm a little bit confused about, I understand why you believe that antitrust is scary for some companies. The part I'm confused about is why it triggers a recession. Are you saying that VC collapse is sufficient to cause a recession in the US?
A couple things, right? So we think VC does comprise a big portion of stock market growth, or if we read cards to say that if you
Stock
test
market
that.
growth?
Yeah.
Sure, but we're talking about a US recession currently as
Yeah,
a whole.
stock market, in fact, is an indicator of U.S. economic
Sure.
health, and we've read that argument.
Okay, so massive past stock market changes, Russia, COVID, overall collapse in 2008. Why did that not trigger anything?
Well, a couple things. We read uniqueness evidencing that it's not the case. Also, the fact that we got lucky in the past is not a reason why we should risk it in the future.
So we got lucky in the past, sure. But what are the structural factors during recessions that cause war? Something I'm so confused about.
The loss of U.S. economic status.
Status.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Also, we have
another
internal
question.
links. Yeah.
So what are the links other than VC? That's a little something I'm confused about.
Yeah, I mean, the VC stuff is like a narrower iteration of our link argument to apply to recessions. But our link, broadly speaking, is about reduced investment activity because of the fear of litigation
Yes.
under the total welfare standard.
So I understand the perception parts of total welfare. You would not say that price fixing, collusion, et cetera is good, correct? Or would you? Would you say price fixing, collusion,
Yeah.
et cetera are good?
Those are per se illegal right now.
Yes, but specifically in the context of total welfare, if we described it, I'm saying the anti-competitive effects that are generated, the ones that exist in the status quo, the ones that we ban. Wait, just to be clear, sorry. By price fixing is referring to a specific subset. I know they're per se legal. Just read the Trinco and Troy McCartan about this. But the question I'm asking is whether or not you say that those anti-competitive effects currently are good, or are you just saying that the chilling effect is bad?
I just don't understand this question.
Is the question
Sorry,
is
I
that
just won't be
you're
able to-
link turning the current anti-competitive effect, or are you saying that there's only a perception of change?
Well, we both. It's like, I don't know how these two things are different.
Yeah, I'm just
companies
asking,
respond
will you
to-
defend that anti-competitive effects in the status quo are good for the economy? It's that simple.
Anti-competitive effects are not good for the economy.
Okay.
But we think the current regime is competitive.
Yeah.
Did I mess something up? I mean, I'm okay debaters, but I think.
Stop.
Okay.
No defaulty forever.
Give me like, I need like 2 seconds, honestly.
Yeah, one in our front.
I know, this is so awkward.
What's up?
This is what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Just read it.
Yeah, 3 seconds. I had a conversation with Kevin about how I always take one in our prep to be like, I'm just making sure this is what you want.
It's good to do.
It is sent. It is the case, the counterplan, or I guess like wherever condo is, but I assume it's on the counterplan. And then the DA. Whichever one Kevin can send. Okay. Yes. Right. Kevin says read, I read. Is all good? Everyone? Awesome. Okay. Framing warming as an existential threat depoliticizes action, outweighs in terms of case. It encourages a view of climate change as an eternal recursion. The idea that the planet will continually getting progressively hotter, which makes people feel hopeless, is empirically demonstrated by ER instilling eco anxiety in school children. That gives us an eternally to an independent depression impact because everyone internalizes the belief that they will die soon. It turns the case. The rhetoric of die by 2050 or 2030 discourages mitigation efforts that would lessen climate change because it's framed as useless to do anything after that point, and we are already too near to those states. It also plays defense to their impact. No scientist views climate as an on-off switch on the human race, so it is not existential. 2EC to this is insufficient. One, yes, link high extinction risk is in the IPCC report that they are talking about biodiversity cascades, and then the 2EC surviving piece of evidence says, quote, population subject to lethal heat conditions beyond the threshold of human survivability. Two, just saying we said it, the IPCC is insufficient. We aren't disputing climate is a real problem. We are disputing characterizing it as an existential threat. Three, the 2EC did not dispute our external impacts or terms case either, so this alone is enough for us to win the debate. Before I do the rest of the defense arguments, I need to play turbulent defense. We did dispute it in the 1C. Green antitrust does not lead to an implementation of global adjustments. You can tell their F quality for this is low because they first said we don't need to win it in 1AC cross-sides, and then didn't explain the warrant in this 2AC card that Kevin dealt with in the 2AC, so we can beat it with the empirical example that U.S. Paris withdrawal did not lead to other countries following suit, nor did they have any solution less than, nor did they have any cards for any solution less than a carbon tax is sufficient to solve. So you have to believe that every country globally will implement a carbon tax as a result of the affirmative to prevent warming independently. 1C2 is bad forecast, which is the right evident. One is inconsistent model. The FNCA says it's not an existential threat. KS theory complicates the ability to predict future weather, and current models are bad at long range forecasting. Two, assumes they're bad science, not IPCC stuff. Assumes no progress. Consumers eat less, recycle more, and tech gains will enable effective mitigation and adaptation. 1C3, no feedback loops. More than half the predicted CO2 has already been released. Their models price in Juju's Arctic 101 threat because the model that they're employing would require a year-round ice-free Arctic, which is exceedingly unlikely. They read this 2EC part about tip points, but didn't really answer this Nicholas piece of evidence, which says that this stuff is speculative. It's not based on a detailed numerical study. That the time scale their impacts is not imminent. It's centuries off because additional warring inputs are finite and occur over time, not all at once. So humanity can continually adapt. It is also unlikely, which is 1C4, that is the McGrath evidence, which says that their models assume a 500% increase in use of coal won't happen. Clean tech prices are falling. So you should reject their media exceptionalism. The 2EC debating on this was poor. It just said you didn't cite climate experts. We did, so that is sufficient to meet the 2EC threshold. China will also keep emitting. That is they emitted 27% of the world's GHGs. India emitted 6.6%. That doesn't prevent those environmental inputs spillovers dealt with above. Mitigation in the U.S. alone is insufficient to solve the best version of their impact. There's also no methane release impact. Then Nicholas et al. In 20, it seems unlikely that catastrophic dissociation of cap rates will be triggered by warming. Methane release and never reaches the atmosphere because microbes just before bubbles down as deep bank similar claims in. Back in 2013, using it as basically unjustified trend line in Excel. This prediction was an arbitrary curve design marking data. The increasing methane is mostly from charcoal sources outside polar regions. Apocalypse with project natural methane or misleading, no oxygen impact. Nicholas, actually too far off from Nicholas at all. In 20D, history is littered with water producing made on short-term observations. Argument that for the runaway cycle, they avoid the trap of short fluctuations. The counterplan condo is good, but we get what we did. They didn't substantiate pre-round or display with the warrant, so it doesn't shield our offense. One, neg flex, change to the 2EC, which requires multiple options. They encourage sandbagging, which makes debate impossible for the neg, but easy for the app because the neg is the only one locked into their speech. Two, arbitrariness. It takes out competing interpretations, no objective difference between our interpretations. Unpredictable rules are worse than none because the app can always exclude the 1C, but never the other way around, which incentivizes theory over substance. Three, defense. Procedurals and DAs not unique. Their stuff. The reject the argument, not the team. The rationale for a significant 1 hour time investment is that if they extend it as a throwaway in the 1 hour or concise 2 hour is sufficient. The DA antitrust escalation bottlenecks, FEI clarity, and Zhang and 20 merger repulsing risk negatively affect local M&A markets likely involve a larger recurrence effect with respect to foreign investment activities and business. It's really possible with navigating merger review to the inherent liabilities and asymmetrics. Manipulate data in 53 U.S. industrial sectors. Merger review is protectionist in effect. While the pre-existing literature based on country level studies presents with IDC U.S. context yields strong evidence in favor of merger repulsing risk. Revised critical infrastructure most NHL blue in 21. Infrastructure benefits essentially from API infrastructure is discussing the hundreds of billions dollars of the countries that are ahead when it comes to surround cities, smart grids, and e-government, such as Islamic industry, to the economy. The U.S. is not able to meet that. Financing and technical so through domestic investment is imperative to incentivize FEI to improve difficulty and resilience in things of adverse events and vulnerabilities. Extinction Friedman in 16. Could encompass the entire planet. Emergency generators and telecom would cease and no fuel cities would have. No water and excessive food. Hospitals cannot operate on preparedness with likely result in societal collapse. The modern tech enables over 98% of the population must have food supply more rapidly. Spoiled farmers cannot feed 310 million. Diverse communities rapidly take over could create anarchic conditions that would profoundly challenge the social order. This whole VC stuff, multiplier effect, we're right. Struggle LSE in 15. The VC has become a driving force of his current companies receive VC funding. Financing. Our sample had 4,063 firms with $21.3 trillion VC-backed companies tend to be young, which is my the revenues is a smaller fraction, but their RFP is 42%. That is according to the title. The U.S. is $444 billion. If we ignore the more positive strategies to create the tech, which change the more previous analysis on because domain were founded before VC even existed after the 79 changed dramatically of their public companies. 43% are VC-backed. Those comprise 57% of the market. The R&D constitutes 82%. VC specialists in innovative companies with a huge potential for growth industries must have had tech, retail, trade, and biotech. It's a foundation for economic recovery. Chain bomb. In 21, investment is emerging as a powerful source of growth that will help sustain the recovery. Companies are ramping up orders as they grow more confident in the outlook. Need the high self-absorbed investment. Moving key to ensuring the recovery maintains rate times, spending based environments, stability, for reopening state investment, health, fuel, economic recovery, lives, worker productivity, and metrics, and national sense of research. Market research.
Right, we're at 742.
Oh, no, you.
Is that 420 left?
Stop looking at my screen.
Dog, you know how to look at the time.
Stop rep 347. Wonderful. So we'd be good for more. And hard.
Yeah, the thermal lights. You can bring that lamp over here.
It's gonna be case, the counter plan, the WTO DA, the econ DA. Is everybody good?
Give me 1 sec to get this started. This is the one. So it's you. Just go.
You good?
Yeah, honestly, just go.
Okay. Climate change is a threat multiplier, causes existential conflict across a variety of fields because it reduces resources, causes floods, climate refugees, all of which heightens the preventing not only for hotspots, but for biodiversity, food chains to collapse, all of which threatens human survival itself. The K at the top framework with the F, it's due to consequences, which means to weigh against a linear risk of depression, I guess. It's the only thing that allows us locus pointing predictable offense. They assume that we said it's a binary, i.e. extinction, yes, no. We read 5 parts of the 1AC that said mitigation is necessary. So their critique is not of saying it's existential, but rather saying it's try or die existential in the sense that it's all or nothing. But we never said that. We said it's immobilizing action because of the fact that it's 3 degrees is less than 4, which is less than 5, i.e. that the mitigation is a silver bullet. That was all the Tracy stuff. The line proper, they said spill over a said when they concede a candle explicitly from the other flow, the other countries will adopt it because it increases WTO credibility. There's an incentive to do so. Second is BTA solves, it makes other countries more expensive even if they don't implement it. Third, so 3 supports mitigation solves that even below the Bryan evidence is bad, even if they're models. We have the best scientists and they say they're credible enough to have conclusive evidence that it will substantially reduce living standards. They say change living standards, it will become too late. Even if you reduce consumption, it still causes climate refugees in most of the developing world. Yes, feedback loops are evidence from the physics students crossed by the cross-sex explanation that the IPCC predicts that there are existential threats, existential loops that cause mitigating effects to decrease exponentially over time. It's not 1,000%. The IPCC evidence has 4 different scenarios. It doesn't assume 5% increase in coal. The China stuff was above, so was the India stuff. We did not say methane independently is an impact, but rather that it's part of the tipping point and feedback cycles that will cause exponential increases of effects over time. Again, Nicholas is a PhD student. We're not going for oxygen as an independent impact, and we can still have evidence forecast effectively. The counterplan. At the top, the F was more than just a carbon tax. It was a total welfare standard. We've got 3 pieces of trivial evidence and mostly audience evidence in the 1ACs that says that broader conception of corporations' role in the economy is necessary because you have to not just say carbon is bad, but other things like pollution on non-carbon sources or dumping in the environment or nuclear waste, all of which hurt the environment and cause mitigating effects of climate change to be increased, which means it's a reason that more than just the carbon CWS is necessary, or more than just the carbon tax is necessary. 2 arguments before I get to the solvency evidence proper. First, it links to the benefit. You increase taxes dramatically. There were 2 pieces of evidence in the 2 and C about price signals being good. That might be true. And you might have independent links to the CWS. Because even then, though, you dramatically increase costs for corporations, all of which their VC evidence says would be bad because it decreases returns, it decreases profits. If they have explicitly conceded the plan helps the economy, then that should overwhelm the links on the DA, which means it's a double bind. They concede it reduces debt, which solves an inevitable crash, and that warming will reduce GDP in the long term. So there's a double bind. Either the counterplan links or the F solves it enough to overwhelm the links on the DA. Now, the proper solvency deficit, they have a recutting. It's not a straw person. Strinkle is criticizing the allowing merger policy and saying that that's the wrong form of green antitrust. We've cut the part of their advocacy that says this is the right form of antitrust. Plan is key to broader environmental sustainability. Domens 21. CWS should be spent taking account of industrial environmental considerations, sustainability, or OECD discuss the strength and innovation, climate environmental goals, combination policy, cost, climate price, or fair cost pollution, air, water, land emissions, not including the price of the market, exclude social cost pressures higher than optimum consumption resources, as generic capacity. There's no reason that why sustainability not being rewarded. Pricing analysis could take into account the costs incurred by the company, environmental cost. A company may pay take closure prices is employing polluting dominant power by committing abuse, excluding rival greener technology, other merits, the unsustainable business practices, dominant solution, produce my employee cheap and polluting means of production, dominant raw materials, my misleading representation to lessons to check them with producer with product again an evangel whereas in water city all these historic combination rivals should cause action environmental rules are insufficiently enforced. The Twin C Nordhaus evidence says it changes at the margins consumptive behavior. Obviously we agree with that, but that by itself is not sufficient because there are other non-price effects. That's key to resolve CWS, myopic focus on environment, hot 12, CWS should not be the end all be all when it comes to combination. CWS to be the balance of matters collective concerns such as environmental protection. CWS not balance, and the results will be Hubbard combination law leads to a balance or to get CWS combination only about those rebel the fittest, also protection of social goals, protecting environment through combination law, environment environmental concerns to be justified consumers not seeking out externalities from a CWS perspective, sure, also not improve environmental reduction on efficiency of emissions. You consider aims to environment rather than attempting to aim into this consumer welfare standard. The Econ DA proper, they conceded we increase global cred that improves goodwill because it's not a WTO exception. I'm not sure what Kevin was trying to do here. If they blow it up, we get no answers. Econ DA. At the toggle answer turns case, none of them assumes the implementation of the app, even if its investment from VC and renewables decreases, they're still dramatically reduced in levels of emission which solves or impact. The Scott evidence is not in the context of the app. It's explicitly what Trinkle is criticizing and says that green merger pollution will actually reduce competition, which is net worst environmental policy. The regulatory capture stuff is so generic. It's the CWS is vague now. There's no reason the app would be captured. Yes, it might be watered down somewhat, but we still get to say we suppose a substantial cost on emissions, which reduces consumption of environmental goods. Drop down to unique to debate proper. All of their stuff is a snapshot. It's saying that in 2022 and the growth will be high. We agree with that. Our argument is that in the long term we'll hit peak oil, which will cause a dramatically reduction in consumption, whether we not like it or not, which guarantees an econ collapse in the long term. Here's more F. Oil supply for collapse by 19. Our economy seems to recover positive GDP 196 under the Paris society. This government's on also policy pursuing higher growth rates and consumption grew by 2.3% for the average growth rate. We rapidly declining resources advance fossil fuel energy goals as MLWs of fossil fuels 7.2 days close by 2052 gas 2060 coal 2090 market at 2090. The link debate proper. I'm not going to contest most of this, just to say that total welfare standard is it does not take out app solvency. Or evidence says it is could be vague, but doesn't assume the environmental focus of the app. We get some amount of durable fiat in conjunction with raising costs of carbon, which means that even if there are multiple goals, you can still substantially change the decision calculus for both VCs and companies to reduce emissions. Now, the impact proper extend clarity. They don't get to just wish it away because there are hotspots now. Empirically, economic decline does not reduce war. That's also the case when there are hegemons like the United States, so it should be applied now. This critical infrastructure stuff is terrible. There's no reason the app reduces mergers. The FDI now solves critical infrastructure sufficiently. They say LIO decline. That's inevitable. Reinhardt 20. The mindset of LIO is directly linked to America's democratic shortcoming. Trump is a symptom institutional to function. Rigid institutions that favor conservative majority. America has a history of ambiguity towards multi-left, the conservative minority, really the LIO nation, Jews, steadily define democratic indices, market indices, no impact of 5G. There's no reason we trade off with 5G tech or why the app standard would be applied to it. Even then, there's no impact. That's back to 18 high-tech industries that China accounts for small shares compared to the United States. Chinese firms are confined to low-tech manufacturing as manufacturing become automated with 3D printing. And China's labor costs have risen from steps of reshoring, take advantage of low energy prices, high school computer proximity customers, Deloitte, and Boston Mutual to protect the United States will overtake the United States by 2022. These are all re-articulations, so there's a balance of power impact. There's no impact to that. That way, 17 other explanations have stability in city economy, any democracy, economic intervention, or war version of regional peace and stability exist when they're used in the United States intervention, market intervention. One more thing on FDIs, they consider we increase trade flows. Yeah, because this market has an one more thing.
All right, we got how much puppy left?
539.
539, okay. Good. Oh, yeah. This way. They're right there. What? Let me see this. I'll find it.
Oh, can you back in? They did not read this part.
Y'all didn't read the Waxen call?
Wait, sorry, which claim?
The critical infrastructure defense?
No.
Just that we have thoughts. It's really weird. Consider you're gonna be fine. It's like, okay. 2 years ago.
Okay, now it's really dark in here.
Facts. Super facts.
I think there are probably more lamps than there.
You want me to go look?
I mean, if it, I think it's fun, but if. you
Oh
want-
yeah, I can't see my clothes.
No
We can
lamp.
move this one.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. That's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
We lit.
I'm good.
I can ask after you.
Oh, there's one there.
Wow.
Well,
That's fine.
Jillian doing God's work.
What under?
We could probably put on the.
Sorry, we're
so
turning it this way.
this one,
No, this will be good, I assume. No, maybe. I don't know.
we can put it on that middle table.
Can you try moving more centrally?
Me? Essentially for now.
Oh my god. Facts.
Nice. Sorry. Oh, this is so much better. And
The hazards of in-person debate that we forgot about.
Do you want to try to move this onto that table?
How to address the item for that.
It's like Blake.
Well, is this helping?
oh, yeah, this is it.
USC, all good with the light now? The cameras cannot see you all. They're gonna have to get
Oh,
over that.
Oh,
Wait,
cut the
actually,
camera.
Can
Yeah.
you move the lamp down? Oh, okay. We can do
Kevin's-
this too.
Kevin's
Hey,
like,
let's go.
Now the camera can only see you.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Kevin's like, I want to show this to my mom after. Oh my god.
Econ DA, WTO, counterplan. Actually, counterplan WTO case.
Econ counterplan WTO case.
Okay.
Is that right?
Okay, use your phone for the timer.
Yeah.
All right, we good?
They dropped the last 2 minutes of the 1 hour critical infrastructure collapse causing extinction from massive blackouts and fuel shortages and energy grid construction, which introduces massive geopolitical instability and launch and warning strikes that go nuclear and escalates societal collapse, like killing 310 million Americans in the span of a month. And the Freeman evidence is our internal link to this being the FDI scenario introduced quantitatively reduces FDI flows by chilling international investor activity, which our evidence says the matter of regression not. It says it's the critical insurance. We do not have enough money domestically to keep our electricity system alive, so we have to depend on international investors. So there's no chance of a link turn in the 2 year. Lastly, they conceded regulatory capture, zaps the plan, dropped into
see the winner does not get to reinvent the wheel. The total welfare standard is de facto circumvented because the nature of arbitrary social political evaluation metrics like costs creates a legal anarchy where everything can fall under the plan's metric, which is magnified by their straw person solves the advocates, which supports that it'd be unnecessarily increasing the subclass litigation over impossible cases is far too large of a burden for competition authorities to even have a consistent data. That's all the Dorsey evidence. Realize that the only argument the 1 year has introduced is defense to the DA. They've not introduced any reason why the plan makes the economy fundamentally better or increases FDI flow. So there's only a reason the campaign would solve the case, and there's no real reason why any of these arguments really add up to an app balance. So basically concede all of them and just have that be the 2 and R. They see the app would dramatically increase green merchant policy. This is false. The plan. Our links were not to the plan doing green antitrust. It was to the expansion of the total welfare standard. Also, the plan increasing FDI analytic makes no fucking sense when they drop the entire link wall in the 2 and R. Not to mention the fact that they conceded the card that links the plan to FDI reduction. Second, the card they read in the 1AC indicates perhaps would indicate that carbon taxes would increase FDI flows because that's the link term they read on the DA. The counterplan obviously shields us, so it's not unique options to the app. Second, they consider the shielding effect internal link that the business would not know which anti-competitive activities would be allowed, which will massively increase the litigation costs and creates non-price inefficiencies because we basically have to determine what social cost is upon every single court case, which reduces investment activity, creates a kind of not hostile business environment, and reduces overall capital investment, which is key to broader economic overturn, which solves the 1 year uniqueness counterplan warrant, the uniqueness counterplan stuff. The oil debate, it's kind of awkward because the only cards Harvard is reading is saying that oil will decrease in 2060 and 2090 are the relevant time frame for a disadvantage is not that. Our evidence indicates that within the next 5 years we'll be undergoing a critical electrical shortage because of lack of semiconductors via FDI shortages. So there's no real impact to any of these things. And second, there's no implication we can have high FDI flows during a recession. It's about the relative the ability to use energy to keep up with supply and demand concerns. So all this stuff about how we'll shift over to renewables, which is a magnifies the disadvantage because it proves that would be because there's no decoupling from the energy grid from all sections of the economy. Last but not least, they've conceded that the renewable energy turn at the top of the 2NC, which the only way to create transition from peak oil to renewable energy is through big tech companies because they're the only ones able to afford the upfront investment that keeps these technologies alive. Because we're at basically at the late stage of technologies where we have to basically connect it to the entire grid via massive transportation networks, which costs billions upon billions of dollars. Durable fiat, they can't durable fiat the enforcement of the plan. They can fiat the standard that they decide to enforce, which are evidence says would be far too difficult to even get off the ground. Economic climate doesn't cause war. Who the fuck cares? We're getting rid of those arguments of inevitable. No Western tech impact. The balance of power stuff doesn't matter. The plan doesn't affect mergers. It doesn't matter at all because our link was to the total welfare standard. Even if it doesn't affect mergers directly, our evidence indicates that it will be applied against them, which certainly decreases foreign investor activity. Lastly, they've also conceded the bottom have to have half the card that institutional investors don't know enough about the American political climate. So they would interpret the plan as an acquisition activity, which certainly triggers the disadvantage of the counterplan. If there's another thing you're concerned about, so the carbon tax certainly solves warming. They read the cards for us in the 1AC. We read more cards in the 1NC that substantiate this claim, and there's no environment impact outside of warming that's been introduced in this debate. So all this stuff about environmental sustainability literally doesn't matter because the counterplan acts as the only relevant internal link that would ever cause it to escalate. They see non-carbon sources. There's the dropper renewables turn on the DA, which clearly acts as this because the internal warning the cards that companies will be less likely to develop renewable technology because they'll be excluded from the market. Our evidence indicates that even if they're excluded, all the funds would go to bigger capital intensive companies, which is the prerequisite to developing new energy to begin with. So we factor in the internal warrant. Second, our venture capital evidence indicates that startups are less likely to form because they're all looking to have exit plans via mass buyouts, and they wouldn't be able to get off the ground because no venture capitalists would ever know whether the company would be antitrusted in the next 5 years because the total welfare standards we internally turn that warrant. Third, the regulatory capture stuff also turns into because what we define as environmental sustainability that basically changes upon every single court case. So all the defense of the disadvantage also takes out that the price theory stuff at the 1AR, which is just basically devolves into no sufficiency framing bad because any risk of the DA shouldn't be evaluated. This is obviously false. Our arguments are specifically targeted to the price theory that undergirds the app, the idea that the CWS must be acclimated to the direct price of goods that are being forwarded to the consumer, not the internal business organization of companies. The whole welfare standard would include that, which disrupts the logical flow of capital investment across the entire economy. You can see the impact of this. You can see the wall of the 2NC, so you cannot vote on the counterplan somehow double turns itself by introducing a net benefit. They see taking sustainability with impact turn this, the internal link, the internal warrant behind the next card is also renewables, and the CDOS card simply does not have a terminal impact. So unless you believe that any of the warming cards in the 1AC suggest that the plan will be able to solve global emissions, anything outside of global emissions technology through a carbon tax, then you
You shouldn't evaluate any of these environmental sustainability claims that are external to the carbon tax counterplan. The WTO counterplan, global credibility does not equate that China implements a carbon tax. They conceded in the 1NC that the plan will only solve about like 5% of warming over the next 3 decades. So there's no way they can access any of this hyperbolic stuff about only causing catastrophic extinction in the next 5 to 10 years to influence or disadvantage. Also, the fact that they can get into the bargaining table have conceded that this results in more escalation and greater trade retaliation, which reduces the propensity for creating a global carbon tax regime. So the plan makes the problem worse, not better. So it creates environmental sustainability risk that the plan so often takes extended in the debate cuts against them. Yeah, lastly, we're way too far off from warning retrospective evidencing the effects of climate change are centuries away. The dissent is way faster. They just said that they would mitigate it over the long term, which is precisely the point of our defense.
347. Sorry.
I'm just gonna pass.
What are you implying?
Nothing, but it didn't break apart before the last speech. The order is case, the WTO DA, the counterplan, the DA. Can you all see me?
Just real quick, you say case, WTO, counterplan, econ?
Yep.
Okay.
Got 20 in there. Popular.
Hey, is everybody good? Excellent. The failure of the True North is going for a critical infrastructure being a massive magnitude impact without having any impact defense on climate change, of course, is the one and only controlling impact for the entirety of the debate. They've conceded the IPCC 22 evidence in the spread card that climate change will cause extinction in the near future. It is incredibly persuasive given the fact that our evidence from scientific experts citing the fact that there's multiple reasons for class biodiversity loss, overall ocean acidification, increasing of social pressures like climate refugees, but also the fact that global warming hurts critical infrastructure has been in every card of the 1AC and 2AC. So the idea that somehow blackouts are distinct from climate change is patently false when the reason why energy would be hurt in the first place with their own card is the disruptions caused by the environment. This means that if green antitrust is key for renewability of those key and critical infrastructure, it means that we turn the DA and have a massive impact of climate change. You may think the carbon tax impact is solvent, but that is simply not true given the incredible specificity of our green antitrust card. The two cards in the 1ER will be the first things that you read in your RFD as they point to the overall sustainability of the economy given a lack of competition review. These cards are damn good and point to the fact that if you just do one action alone, it does not do enough to change the direction of the economy. You may change the pricing, but it's not change the anti-competitive tax that companies are currently doing to directly harm things like the grid that they have read as their impact. The only line they had is too far off. Fuck off. We've read plenty of cards that climate change is happening now that soon, that degrees of mitigation matter. We read 4 separate cards, and that's so even if the carbon tax decreases climate change by 100 ppm or by 0.2 degrees does not do sufficient work to mitigate it as a whole. Total welfare is necessary for this analysis, dealing the massive magnitude of this impact. He said it must outweigh presumptively. WTO. Kevin sounded really persuasive here, but I don't even know what he's talking about. There's no link to any of the change to trade. There's no impact, no change to the economy. I don't really understand this. Never mind. Top level question is whether or not green antitrust is necessary, not all of the line by line at the bottom. Remember the fact that the only thing the counterplan does is a carbon tax does not change any of the competition policy. So it becomes a question of link debate on the TA. But there is no impact to any of this stuff. They try to do a turn that renewables are good. I will do offense in the DA way. That is simply not true. All the arguments are just re-articulations of the 2 and R on the DA, not actual analytic offense. They have no reason why carbon tax is able to solve alone. They read multiple cards that say that carbon tax is good for solving climate change. Now that's the necessary silver bullet for mitigation. We've read multiple cards, the Dolman card, and the second piece of 1ER evidence are excellent that the sustainability of the economy was depend on preventing big companies from manipulating the market to prevent things like energy changes as a whole. The fact that went for an energy impact is ridiculous given the specificity of the Dolman card to those sectors. Big companies are using things like collusion, overall changes in pricing, increases in preventative costs are all bad. We say total welfare is necessary to forces companies to internalize the cost that they place on the climate. Sure, pollution may be something that they change from emission, but they do not change the overall sustainability of the environment. They say this is not climate change, not its independent impact. First, we've said that environmental collapse is the impact of climate change. So if things like nuclear waste dumping, increasing pollution in rivers, all this were conceded that we are solvent. Simply that they don't have an impact. Of course, they do. The collapsing ability for people to thrive and exist on the world, given the IPCC evidence. They say that price theory of change is false. The total welfare cards that we read answer this presumptively. Do not change the entirety of the system. Just force companies to internalize the cost that they keep polluting on the planet. The end. First of all, remember when you evaluate this debate that they are not going for an economy DA. They're going for a very small FDI impact. They have entirely rearticulated the DA and the 2R from a big DA about mergers and acquisition to a very small DA about mergers and acquisitions, changing FDI flows. That change matters. 2 reasons. 1, they can see the fact that the carbon tax of the F saves the entirety of the economy by changing the jet to GDP ratio. That means that even if foreign funding is good for some areas, they drop that we save overall economic growth and recovery. Second, all of their links are very specific about things like VCs helping renewables or VCs being important. None of those cards are about FDI, meaning to effectively scratch them off your flood. FDI impact. Critical infrastructure scenario is terrible. Taking the debate on that will lose the debate. They only had a couple of analytics, which is more than enough given how damn bad their card is. It's only 1 card. 1. It's not unique. This scenario is 0. The 1 year says that they have no evidence that the FDI is solved now. Their evidence explicitly says that we need more FDI investment. That means that the link is non-unique. His infrastructure is already terrible. You should read their card. I'll quote a couple of lines. Basically, the 1 year link evidence says that U.S. infrastructure is dangerously overstretched and that the United States is not able to meet the current financing and technological gaps solely through the domestic cap. It says that we need to incentivize more FDI. Basically, even the 2R said that there will be an electricity crunch now, which proves that there's 0 uniqueness for the critical infrastructure being sufficient. Sees the point. Even their impact card says that we are unprepared. It says, quote unquote, the EMP Commission warns that a natural or nuclear EMP event, given the current unpreparedness, will likely result in societal collapse. Sees the point. This is problematic because Kevin goes on to this as an independent DA, but tries to insulate it from the overall structure of the economy, which is not if you read the quotes from the card. Second, no link. The link evidence about merger policies with other countries. The plan effectively interacts with that, but there's no evidence the plan prevents mergers that are necessary for the economy. The 2R link explanations about chilling factory space only says economy-wide, but 0 reason why the plan would reduce mergers or change it to anything. They say turns case for the environment. Their only reasons are that big companies are good for challenging climate change. That is true, and that's the reason why them forcing to articulate to internalize their costs as necessary. Read the specificity of the 1 year evidence. We're not collapsing entirely the regulatory regime. They see things like VC is good for renewables. What incentive is there for renewables now? None. Even if you change the pricing, it has nothing to do something like green technology policy. The competition policy that we generate solves their benefit, but it means that the counter plan alone will fail to generate the things that they say solves. No will. Only the 1 year evidence is sufficient here.
Good debate.
One an hour, 2 5. It's in 1 hour, 2 5.